Hey YouTube, it's Chris, K2CJB with K2CJB Radio. Welcome back to the channel. As you can see, this isn't a typical video that I shoot. I'm actually sitting in my ham shack at home, and I was inspired to record this video and to post it after I saw a video on Ham Shack TV, Josh AA4WX. He put up a video not long ago where he said ham radio is dying and it's our own fault. And to that I have to say, hear, hear. Now, why do we say it's dying? Now, I'm not basing it on how many licenses have been issued or how many hams are in whatever database it is. I'm basing this on just some basic observations that I think Josh also had, and I've had them around here where I am. And it's been over the last couple of years. It's not recent. This is over more than, I would say more than 5, maybe 10 years I've seen this sort of thing going on. Josh's point, he had 3 points that he made when he started his video. He said that repeaters are quiet. The repeaters are quiet. Club meetings are empty. Club meetings are empty. And then the third thing he said was the same 10 people are running every event. Yeah, I think he's right. Right on with all these things. Here's my observation to this and how I wanted to jump into this conversation. Let's talk about the repeaters being quiet. My personal experience here where I am is I'll turn my radio on. I have all the local repeaters programmed into it. I can let it scan all day long. And maybe I'll hear one conversation on any of the repeaters. There are times when I'll sit on my porch in the summertime and I might take an HT out there and I'll be scanning around listening to repeaters. And on a Wednesday or a Thursday night, that seems to be the nights, I might hear a net start up. Well, that's great. What I hear in those nets usually is people checking. They'll check in with their call sign and they'll say in and out, in and out. Whatever the call sign is, I'm in and out. Which really means that the net came up. The operator ran his usual preamble and people checked. He took his check-ins. They were in and out. Nobody stayed around. He read whatever it was at the end of the net. Where are the club information nets that used to occur all the time? Where are the technical nets that used to take place all the time? Club information nets are great. If someone's got an HT, they turn around and listen to your repeater, which most of the time is owned by a club. They can learn a lot more about your club listening to your club information net. We get on a net to hear when's the next meeting, what's the topic of the next meeting, how many events are we going to be involved with, all those sorts of things. I don't hear those. I don't hear those. Now look, don't make this sound like I'm generalizing this as a whole country around all over the place. I'm saying my experience has been that the nets are typically non-existent. I mean, there are some tech nets. I was in a club in Pennsylvania that still has it. Every Sunday night they have a tech net, and it's a wonderful roundtable discussion. But I don't hear that anymore where I am now in Connecticut. I don't hear that. I just hear some nets checking in and out. That's it. So, okay, that's the end of the rant on that. Now, here's what I would say as a solution to that. I think a lot of hams have probably resorted to texting each other or emailing each other, maybe through email reflectors or direct email back and forth. Maybe they're using some sort of a chat group or an instant messenger group or something like that to communicate. Most of that traffic, I would argue, could get on a repeater. You could put it on a repeater. So the repeater is active. So when people are turning around, they hear call signs and people in the club talking about whatever they're talking about. Doesn't need to be kept in email and that sort of thing. I think those are the things that need to be put out more on a repeater rather than other ways. Now let's talk about club meetings. Now again, I haven't joined or attended a club meeting up here in Connecticut in the 5 years I'm here, to which I do say I probably should have done something about that. But I did check into a couple of local clubs around here. And the first thing I noticed was their websites. One of them, the website hasn't been updated in 5 years. 5 years. I don't know if the meeting information is still accurate. I don't know if the meeting place is still in the same place. I haven't seen anything new. Like what have they done for field day? What are they doing for POTA or any of that kind of stuff? Nothing. There's been no information. The website is pretty old. And I'm sure you look at other clubs, you're going to see the same thing. The website is one of the more important things if you want to attract new members to your club. I would use the repeater to communicate club information. You could duplicate it on your website, but boy, you got to have some traffic on your website as well. I would also say that social media is important. How about your Facebook page? Does the club have a Facebook page? It doesn't cost anything. On your Facebook page, you can have the day-to-day. Here's some pictures from our last meeting. Here's the person that presented at our last meeting. Why don't we have anything like that? How about a YouTube channel? Like you're watching this one, a club could have a YouTube channel showing all the activities of the club. So when he said the club meetings are empty, it could be because no one knows about the club and what's going on in the club to want to go and visit the club at a club meeting. Josh also mentioned that the same 10 people run every event. And that's probably true. If you look at some of the Facebook pages that do put pictures up, you'll see the same handful of people going out to POTA things, out to picnics, out to whatever they're doing. You'll see the same handful of folks. Kind of tells you that, is the club growing? Is it not? What's going on with the club? What are they doing? Are they stuck in the past and just doing the same thing they do year in and year out because that's what we do? Okay, fine, but boy, it would be good to have some more activities out there, wouldn't it? And have more people involved. When you get a new member in a club, get them plugged into something. Ask them to do a quick presentation on their ham shack, whatever it might be. Something to get the newer faces more involved in the club so the club becomes a little more dynamic rather than just the same old, same old. How do we alleviate some of this? Well, first I already talked about the repeater stuff. Get off of texting and emails and all that stuff. Use your repeater to do that. Use your repeater to check in with each other. And use the repeater to have a net that's actually an active net and not just checking in and out. That's the first thing. Second thing is, how do we attract folks to the hobby in the first place, right? Used to be, you would do it through the Boy Scouts, you could do it through schools. I don't think that's so much the case anymore. I know there are Boy Scout troops that do get involved in ham radio. They do go for their little radio communication badge. And there are clubs that connect with those Boy Scout troops. Fantastic. That's the way it should be. But I don't know if that's really the norm anymore. And certainly in schools, I don't think there's ham radio activities in many schools. I could be wrong, but I don't think there's really that many. Also, we kind of focus on the emergency communication side of things. We'll talk to folks and say, hey, if you have your ham license, your ham radio gets through when cell phones don't. Very true. When you have a major hurricane or something like that, what does everybody turn to? You go to any TV outlet, and what do they say? Oh, a ham radio operator got on the air from wherever the hurricane was and sending information through. It happened in the Carolinas too. Radio was what was working. Even the broadcast stations were down. Cell phones were down. Everything was down. But radio worked. So we can try to use that as the pitch, right? Aries and racies in a lot of ways gets like clubs, doesn't it? It gets a little bit exclusive. And I don't know if that's really the way to get somebody interested in the hobby. But I'll tell you what we do have. We do have folks that are interested in radio communications. They're preppers. And many of them took the FCC test so they could get their call sign and get their license. So wouldn't it be great to embrace them and maybe have club activities that are geared toward preppers so they can practice using their radios, they can practice radio communications, they can practice radio etiquette and how to operate. These, I think, are important things. And that's an untapped resource, I think, of folks that they're already plugged in, they've got their ticket, but why are they not in the hobby? Why don't we hear them on the repeaters? Why don't we run the exercises they'd like to run on repeaters? I'll tell you where you do find these folks using these radios. You see it in GMRS, which Josh talked about in a subsequent video. GMRS communications. I have a GMRS rig here, and there are times when I have that on, I hear more activity on a local repeater on my GMRS radio than I do on my ham rig. That's a fact. I've seen that. GMRS, of course, the barrier to entry is you pay $35 to get a family license, where you don't. Not everybody has to go for the exam and get their own call sign. That's an advantage there, I think, over ham radio, but it's GMRS. It's not as prolific as ham radio. It doesn't have as many frequencies available, bandwidth available to it, but still there are people that use it. There are off-roaders that use GMRS rather than ham radio, even though a Baofeng could be as cheap as or cheaper than a GMRS radio. And now let's speak about another barrier to entry sometimes that people talk about. So I'm kind of on a rant here. Used to be a barrier of entry to ham radio was cost. These radios are not cheap. You can spend well over $1,000 to get an ICOM or a Yaesu. However, our Chinese friends have made it cheaper. You can get a Xiegu HF rig for under $1,000. You can get a Baofeng HT or a TOIT HT for under $100. So you can get folks into the hobby. There used to be the cost was the barrier of entry. I used to say that all the time, but I don't believe that anymore. I think you can still get into the hobby at an affordable price. Let me just summarize this. I've been on a rant. Let me just summarize this. The first thing I think that we have to say to all ham radio operators who are watching this, use your radio. Use your repeaters. Get on, don't just ka-chunk there. Put your call sign on there and say you're listening. Who knows? Maybe you'll talk to somebody. Just like you on HF, everyone says, oh, the bands are dead. Have you put a CQ out to see if anyone's out there? Anyway, use your radio. If you're in a club, use your repeater. Don't just email and text. Use the repeater. If you're in a club and you have a net, make sure it's a real net, not just checking in and out. I learned nothing about your club listening to people checking in and out. Doesn't tell me anything. And also for clubs, make sure your social media is updated. Make sure your website's updated. Make sure it's current. Make sure it's inviting so folks will want to join your club and be a part of the activity. Okay, I think my rant's over. Is radio dying? Maybe it is. And it is our own fault because we're not using the radios. We have the license, we have the radios, we don't turn them on, and we don't key that mic. So anyway, that's my rant. Feel free to blast away in the comments down below. I'm sure many of you will disagree. I'm sure some of you will agree. This is my observation. You might say, well, Chris, maybe you ought to get out and do something about it. You're right. I probably should. But I'm just putting this out there, actually in response to Josh. Josh, I agree with you. And I think maybe we can start this sort of a movement to get people to start using their repeaters again. Okay, rant is over. If you like this video, please click like. Also, would you consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already? I do put other sort of operating sort of things up on. It's no rants. I think it's the only rant I've ever done. But I would really appreciate it if you consider hitting subscribe. And of course, that helps me in the YouTube algorithm, and you know how that all works. So again, until the next time we meet, hopefully on the radio, 73 from K2CJB.